we have a breaking down of the monetary order. We are going to change the monetary order because we cannot spend the amounts of money, so we have that problem. And when we talk about the dollar and we talk about tariffs, we have that. We are having profound changes.
The dollar is having its worst first half of a year in decades. And so it's been a long, long time since the dollar has been this weak. That is very significant, especially true when you're hoping to bring down the inflation rate. And when you're not really sure how tariffs are going to impact prices, we know that the exchange rate will. Because if the euro is 13% higher than it was when the year began, that means everything that we import from Europe is going to be 13% more expensive.
For nearly 100 years, the United States dollar has stood as the undisputed pillar of the global financial system. It has functioned as the world's reserve currency, the benchmark of international trade, and the ultimate safe haven for investors during times of turmoil. But what if I told you that by 2026, this cornerstone of American power could collapse? What if the very currency that underpins not only Wall Street, but also the daily lives of ordinary citizens was on the verge of a historic fall? It may sound alarmist, yet the warning signs are clear, and they are growing more urgent by the day. From ballooning national debt to accelerating geopolitical realignments, the forces gathering against the dollar are no longer abstract or distant. They are here, in motion, reshaping the global economy in real time. And the consequences of such a collapse would not remain confined to political elites or financial institutions. They would reverberate across every corner of American life, touching savings, retirement accounts, mortgages, grocery bills, fuel prices, and even the nation's political stability.
In our domestic order, how ruling is existing. And we're having profound changes in the world order. Such times are very much like the 1930s. I've studied history, and this repeats over and over again. So if you take tariffs, if you take debt, if you take the rising power challenging the existing power, if you take those factors and look at the factors, those changes in the orders, the systems, are very, very disruptive.
This is not speculation for the distant future. This is a scenario that, if trends continue, could arrive as early as 2026. To understand how this could happen, we must begin with the challenge emerging from abroad. For decades, the US dollar has been at the center of world trade, not because of natural law, but because of international trust and geopolitical dominance. The so-called petrodollar system ensured that oil, one of the world's most vital commodities, was priced and sold in dollars. This system created a global demand for the currency and allowed the United States to borrow and spend far beyond what would otherwise be sustainable. But today, that foundation is under threat. The BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, once dismissed as a loose coalition of emerging markets, has evolved into something far more consequential. Not only has it expanded to include other nations such as Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, but it has also openly declared its ambition to create an alternative to the dollar. At recent summits, BRICS leaders have discussed establishing a new currency, one potentially backed by commodities such as gold, oil, and gas. This is not mere rhetoric. China and Russia have already begun settling energy deals in their own currencies. Iran, long strangled by US sanctions, is eager to escape the dollar's grip. And Saudi Arabia, once the cornerstone of the petrodollar system, is signaling a willingness to sell oil in yuan. Each of these moves represents a crack in the foundation of American financial dominance. And when enough cracks appear, collapse becomes inevitable. Why does this matter so profoundly for Americans at home? Because the dollar's global status is what gives the United States its extraordinary economic advantage. It is what enables the government to finance deficits through cheap borrowing. It is what allows the Federal Reserve to print money during crises without immediate catastrophe. And it is what permits ordinary citizens to trust that the value of the money in their pockets will remain stable. Remove the dollar's privileged status, and the entire structure begins to unravel. Debt becomes more expensive, inflation accelerates, confidence in the currency erodes, and the savings of ordinary Americans are put at risk. The debt situation alone is a ticking time bomb. America's national debt has now exceeded $34 trillion, and the pace of accumulation shows no sign of slowing. Interest payments on this debt are projected to surpass even the nation's defense budget within a few short years. For perspective, That means the United States will soon spend more money servicing its debt than protecting its borders or funding its military. Traditionally, this enormous debt burden has been manageable because foreign investors, governments, central banks, and institutions were eager to buy U.S. bonds, trusting in the dollar's stability. But what happens if that trust disappears? What happens if countries, emboldened by BRICS alternatives, stop purchasing U.S. bonds and instead pivot to other currencies or commodities? The answer is grim. The United States would be forced to finance its debt internally, pushing interest rates sky high and triggering an economic crisis. The dollar, once the bedrock of confidence, would become a liability. And this is where the effects reach ordinary Americans in the most direct and painful ways. Because when a currency loses trust, the fallout is immediate and brutal. Savings accounts, retirement plans, and pension funds, denominated in dollars, would lose purchasing power rapidly. Every dollar would buy less at the supermarket, less at the gas station, and less in housing markets. Mortgage rates would climb as lenders demanded higher returns to offset the risk. Businesses would struggle to borrow, leading to layoffs, bankruptcies, and unemployment. The cost of living would spiral upward, leaving middle-class families squeezed and vulnerable. We have seen glimpses of this before. The inflation spike of the early 2020s caused genuine hardship for millions of households. But that was a contained crisis, one the Federal Reserve could attempt to manage. A collapse of the dollar, however, would be an uncontrolled freefall, an inflationary shockwave with no easy solution. And here lies the vicious cycle. Faced with collapsing confidence, the government might resort to printing more money to meet obligations. But printing would only worsen inflation, further undermining the dollar's value. Investors would flee to gold, silver, or cryptocurrencies, abandoning U.S. assets. Stock markets would plunge, wiping out retirement accounts and investment portfolios. And the downward spiral would accelerate until the dollar's collapse was complete. At that point, the consequences extend beyond economics. They become social and political. History shows us that when currencies fail, societies are shaken to their core. Hyperinflation in Weimar Germany gave rise to extremism. Economic collapse in Argentina led to mass protests and political upheaval. The same pattern could emerge in the United States. Imagine a scenario where food prices double or triple in months, where fuel costs climb to unaffordable levels, where unemployment surges, savings evaporate, and the government appears powerless. Public trust in institutions would erode rapidly, and with it, social stability. The collapse of the dollar would not only devastate personal finances, it could destabilize the nation itself. As we look toward 2026, the warning signs cannot be ignored. The time for complacency has passed. The dollar's dominance is under siege, and unless decisive action is taken, the United States may soon awaken to the unthinkable, the collapse of its currency, and with it, the unraveling of the economic order it has long taken for granted. That is the looming reality. A dollar collapse in 2026 is no longer unthinkable. It is a genuine risk, one that every American must take seriously.